Working in local news, you cover dozens of stories in a week. It's really hard to remember them all. There are a few that will always stand out in your mind. And I've wanted to do this project for a while, just to talk about some of the biggest stories that still are kind of etched in my brain. I'm not going to do the big national stories, the 9/11s, things like that. I think everyone knows those were big stories of their journalism career. I'm talking about some of the hyper local stories that really impact us. So I've been a journalist since 1996, and here are the top 5 stories that still haunt me. Now, this story really sticks with me because it was the first story I was exposed to as I was driving to my first job in Reno back in 1997. I was in the middle of the Nevada desert. There were no radio stations, and this is before you could plug your iPhone in and listen to a bunch of songs. So I found an AM radio station, and it was talking about this murder in southern Nevada. 7-year-old Sharice Iverson was killed in a Prim, Nevada casino. Now, while the death of a little girl is always tragic, the circumstances of this story are what really haunts me to this day. Overnight on May 25th, again, this is 1997, 18-year-old Jeremy Strohmeyer and his 17-year-old friend David Cash Jr., they're wandering around Prima Donna Resort Casino. Now, 7-year-old Sharice Iverson, she was at the casino. She was brought there by her dad. He was gambling. Several people reportedly had said to him, "Hey, your little girl's wandering around. Can you get her someplace safe?" And the dad apparently did not take any action. So she was seen wandering around the arcade, and that's also where you could see Strohmeyer and Cash wandering around. Security cameras show Sharice in that arcade area, and in the back corner of this frame, there is a bathroom. She is shortly going to go in there, and this picture, this still frame from the security camera, is the last known picture of her alive. So Strohmeyer followed Sharice into the bathroom, and apparently they were playing, wadding up paper towels, throwing them at each other. And then at one point, Sharice took a floor cleaning sign and threw it at him, and somehow that must have triggered him. So about the same time, Cash Jr. walks into the bathroom, and he sees what's happening. He watches as Strohmeyer pushes Sharice into a bathroom stall. He knew something bad was happening, and he turned around and walked out. A short time later, Strohmeyer came out, reportedly told Cash that he molested and killed the little girl, and they just went about their day. Nobody reported anything or did anything. And it's just heinous to me to think that you could know something like that is happening and not do anything about it. So Strohmeyer was arrested a few days later. He was represented by the same attorney who defended the Menendez brothers. He did take a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He is serving 4 life sentences. As for Cash Jr., no charges, nothing. He knew something bad was happening, had happened, had days to think about it, didn't say or do anything. To add insult to injury, let's take a look at what he told the LA Times a few weeks after this all happened. The story jarred me on so many levels, just as a green journalist, getting into a profession where I, wanted to affect change and wanted to help people and keep people safe. And it was just my first look at just the real horrendous nature that people can have. With tragedy came action. In 2000, the Nevada legislature enacted the Sharice Iverson bill, which does include fines and potential jail time for anyone who sees a crime of this nature and doesn't report it. So unfortunately, way too late for poor little Sharice Iverson, but hopefully we'll protect other people down the road who go through similar crimes. The next story that haunts me plays into my fear of bridges. I am scared of bridges. I believe there is some force that is going to shove me off the bridge and into the water, and I'm not going to be able to survive it. This story is definitely my worst nightmare come true. It really happened in the remote area of Oklahoma called Weber's Falls. This is May of 2002. The bridge crossed over the Arkansas River, where a lot of freight barges were going back and forth, just normal river traffic. Early that Sunday morning, a barge hit a critical support beam on the bridge, causing the bridge to collapse. Now, keep in mind, this is Oklahoma, southern Oklahoma, so it's pretty flat. and it's early on a Sunday morning and there's not a large community around. So as cars approached, they didn't know the road wasn't there. They drove off, just car after car. There was no warning. A few people were able to slam on their brakes and avoid going in. But just to think about, it's a Sunday morning drive. Maybe you're going to see family. Maybe you're going to church. And the bridge that you are normally used to going over just isn't there anymore. A 600-foot section was just gone. It turns out the driver passed out at the wheel of the barge, possibly from a heart condition. There was a lot of speculation initially. Had he been drinking? Had he worked an exceptionally long shift? But they believe it was some kind of freak heart condition that caused him to pass out, which led the barge to hit the support structure. All total, 14 people died. 11 people were injured. Only 3 of the people who went into the water were able to swim to safety. And there was a nearby fishing tournament where some of the fishermen from there were helping pull some of the people out of the water and try and do some rescues. So what's more on this story? A man named William James Clark happened to be in the area. He dressed up as a U.S. Army captain and took control of the scene. He held news conferences. Local authorities listened to him. The FBI was even listening to him. I remember being in the Fox 23 newsroom, and we were listening to some of the news conferences he was giving, and we're like, that doesn't add up. That doesn't make sense. And it turns out he was just a big old phony. Once people started getting suspicious of him, he took off. He ran. He was captured later in Canada. But again, this is just one of those stories where worst nightmare come true, compounded by an imposter taking control of a tragedy, just leading to so much more confusion at a time when they really needed answers. Here, I don't cross a bridge now, any kind of bridge. It used to be the big suspension bridges that scared me. Now it's anything that goes over water, because I have that image of just, is the bridge going to be there? And it's a story like this that just really haunts my brain with it. So a man named Joseph Duncan had driven by the Groney house. The Groney house is one of those homes that when you're, driving in kind of a rural area outside of a major city, you'll see like random houses on the side of the road that you kind of wonder, how did that house get there? This was one of those homes, kind of in the middle of nowhere, but right alongside a major interstate. So one day, Joseph Duncan saw 2 kids playing out front, and as a lifelong felon, he was on the run from child molestation charges. It triggered his urge. So he began stalking the Groney house, seeing their patterns, their comings and goings. So he went into an unlocked home where the mother, her fiance, and a 13-year-old son were just hanging out in their living room like you would do on any given night. He told the mother to go wake up the young children. Shasta was 8 years old and Dylan was 7, and he said, go get them and bring them in. He zip tied the mother, the fiance, and the 13-year-old, and then he took the 2 younger children out into the rental car that he had stolen. So he goes back into the house, brutally bludgeons the mother, fiance, and 13-year-old. I do know a lot more graphic detail about what happened there. I am not going to go into it. You can look it up if you have interest in that. But it is one of the most heinous, horrendous overkills I have ever heard of. So once he is done with that satanic act, then he leaves and he gets in the car and he takes the 2 younger children. So Shasta and Dylan were taken to a remote campsite in Montana where they were sexually abused, tortured, just again, things that I know that I'm not going to share, but it was, just as your worst nightmare combined with the mind of Satan is what he did to these kids. He did end up killing Dylan, claimed it was accidental. He shot him, and I'm so torn. There's so many details of that. Not going to go into that either. But he did kill the 7-year-old, but he kept 8-year-old Shasta, and continued to, do horrendous things to her. Now, they were captured. A short time later, they were at a Denny's in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where a waitress recognized them, and they called the police. and they surrounded the restaurant, and Joseph Duncan was taken into custody without incident, and then Shasta was, taken to get some medical care and then was returned to her family. And then on top of all of this, it turns out Duncan had a blog where he documented his day-to-day molestation of children. And people actually read this blog, like other sex offenders read this blog. Just disgusting details that, again, I'm not going to go into. As a journalist, either you're digging or people around you are digging into a story and you're finding out information because you have to know the full story. Doesn't mean you have to report every detail, but you have to know everything that you can know. And then you decide what is appropriate to put out on television or on the website. But yeah, he had documented his demonic mind, and other people were consuming that content. It's just disgusting. So Joseph Duncan was sentenced to death on 3 counts. He had a slew of other life sentences that were put onto him for the Groening murders and other crimes that he was connected to. So luckily, he will never see the outside world again. But it is unfortunate that he was allowed to, as long as he was here, get away with so many heinous crimes. And then on top of that, this historic, brutal incident that finally led to him being taken away from the general population. Okay, this next story happened in Las Vegas in 2007. This kind of brings everything ethically that we are taught in journalism. And there are those rare times you have to break the rules, and this was one of those. It centers around a videotape that was found randomly under a sign near Pahrump. It was a VHS tape. Never really understood how the tape ended up under a sign. But anyways, on this videotape, there is video of a little girl, 3 years old, being molested. You do not see the molester's face. You only see the little girl in the video. And they needed to identify who the little girl was so they could further pursue this crime. Now, we did get a picture of the little girl, one still frame. I'm purposely not showing the picture here because once this case was resolved, I vowed I would never look at it, see it again. It did not show anything egregious, but it was the face of an innocent 3-year-old girl. And when you knew the context of where the picture came from, you wouldn't want to see it either. So Metro Police asked us to show the picture until they could identify who the girl was. We knew the video was shot in 2003 and this was 2007. So they needed to put her image out there so they could find out who she was and talk to the parents and see if the little girl had any memories of what happened. Now, in local news, we generally don't show sexual assault victims unless they are adults and want to tell their story, unless they want to go on air and they want to, for catharsis or to help encourage other people to report crimes like this. We certainly would never show an underage sexual assault victim, especially and exponentially a 3-year-old girl. However, the rare circumstances of this, we needed to show the picture so we could help catch the monster behind it. And I'll never forget that day. I was producing the 5 p.m. and we were leading both half hours with this story. And about 5:15, a call came in from the assignment desk and they said, they've identified the girl. And I don't know if my fingers ever moved so fast in my entire career to rearrange the 5:30 half hour to never have to show that picture again. We did breaking news and said the girl's been identified. We're no longer going to be showing her photo. We removed it from all of our digital properties. It was a nice sigh of relief that we did not have to show that photo anymore. And I haven't seen that picture in years, but the image, it is seared in my brain. It's one of those things you just can't unsee. Now, we did find out that the little girl had no memory of the heinous act committed against her. The mother was able to identify who the person was that would have shot that videotape. His name, and this is no joke, his name was Chester Stiles. Yes, Chester the molester. So a nationwide manhunt went out to find Chester Stiles. It was everywhere. You couldn't pass a TV without seeing Chester Stiles in this October, I think it was October 2007-ish. On the night of October 17th, I remember we were in the Fox 5 newsroom and we kept hearing on the scanners something big was going on. And I was like, did they just say they caught Chester Stiles? And when I looked up the address, it was like 3 blocks from our TV station. Apparently they pulled him over during a routine traffic stop. And as the Henderson police officers walked up to him, he said, "I'm the guy you're looking for. I'm Chester Stiles. You got me." And was taken into custody without incident. And, one of the, kind of jarring on top of jarring on top of jarring parts of this story, he wasn't even sorry for what he did. Let's take a look at what he said upon his sentencing. So Chester Stiles is now serving 21 life sentences with probation possible in 140 years. At the time this sentence was handed down, this was one of the longest in the history of the world. It was an exceptionally long sentence, but he did avoid the death penalty by a plea deal. So I remember this cold Nevada morning like it was yesterday. I was driving into work. I was news director at Colo 8 in Reno, and I heard that there were 2 children who had died, 2 teenagers who had died in Fernley, which is about 35 minutes outside of Reno. So I walked into the newsroom and I said, "Hey," and I said, I heard we have 2 dead teenagers in Fernley. Like, what's going on?" And the reporter said, "Yeah, they think it's a suicide." And something in my gut said, no, there's more to this. And then on top of that, while we generally don't report suicides, when it's 2 teenage kids, you wonder what the story is there. Was it a Romeo and Juliet thing? Was it a murder-suicide? You just have to wonder what the circumstances were. So again, you go to the story to get the information, and then you decide what you put out. So here's what happened. There are 2 16-year-olds. 16-year-old boy picks up his 16-year-old girlfriend. Mom says, the curfew's 10 p.m. And the boy says, "Yeah, no problem. I'll have her back by then." Now, this is Fernley, Nevada, so there's not really a whole lot to do. And the thought is that they went and did some off-roading. He had a 4-wheel drive vehicle, so they had done some off-roading. He brings her home. It's right before 10. Mom looks out the window, sees that the car is there. She knows her baby girl's home safe. She goes to bed. So she wakes up around midnight, notices that her daughter's not still inside, looks out the window and sees that the SUV is still outside and it's still running. And God bless this mother. She went out to, see what they were doing. Why were they still in the car? And they had passed away. So here's what happened. It is believed that when they were off-roading, they somehow messed up the exhaust pipe. Either they broke it or bent it or something happened. So as these teenagers were sitting in the car for their final moments as lovebirds, you remember what it was like being a teenager in love. You want to spend every second you possibly can together. So as they were sitting there talking about whatever teenagers talk about, they were slowly being poisoned by something they couldn't taste, smell, see. And they died from that poisoning. So it turned out to not be a suicide. It was just a horrendous accidental death. And it really stuck with me, just as here were 2 lives and 2 people who were, just in love, and they were good kids. And I mean, the memorial service that they had, for the students, almost 1,000 people came out to it. And the small town of Fernley, Nevada, it's just really heartbreaking when something happens. Crimes are terrible. Intentional crimes break your heart. You wonder how somebody could think like that. This is something, how do you control it? You don't know. And to this day, if I even think I smell a little bit of exhaust in my car, I'm rolling down the windows and very worried about that. But it was a freak accident that took the lives of 2 teenagers, and it definitely still haunts me. Now, we can't talk about these stories without talking about the mental health impacts of it. When I say these stories haunt me, it is not as a bragging point. It is as I have taken these stories home with me, some for decades. It is important that we take care of our mental health. As journalists, we get into the business, we want to shine lights in dark corners and expose corruption and hold powerful people accountable, make communities safer and better. With that task does come covering some of these horrendous stories. Even, for example, in the Joseph Duncan case, the jurors needed mental health counseling. Some detectives needed mental health counseling because the details are just so jarring. So I want to make sure that if you're watching this as a journalist and you have a story that haunts you, go talk to someone about it. Mentalhealth.gov is a great place to start. There's plenty of resources where you can get the mental health help you need to discuss the things you've seen. You are normal for being bothered by this. You are human for trying to find a way to wrap your head around it. If it didn't bother you, you should probably seek a mental health counselor as well, because it's not normal to not be bothered by horrendous things that happen. You know, you can also reach out to your company's HR department, ask what mental health resources are available. Many companies have an employee assistance program where if you call that number, you can get immediate help, you can schedule counseling sessions, and it's nothing that anyone in your company knows about. It's something you do in the privacy of your home. And that's for things, you know, it doesn't have to be, the horrendous, brutal murder of a child. It can be for, I'm really stressed in my job, I feel overworked, I cry on my way home, I'm having financial issues, I don't know how to balance it, I just had a really bad breakup and I'm having a hard time focusing. It can be for anything that is stopping you from being your best self. So if you broke your arm, you would go get help. You'd go to the emergency room. You wouldn't wait on that. Don't wait when part of your brain is broken, when something is bothering you. If you're having nightmares about work or a work story, please go get the help that you need. I wish that sooner in my career, these kinds of conversations could have been normal, to say, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I'm burned out, I need help. I really want to help remove the stigma of the things that we go through, because there are brilliant moments in journalism. There are times that we help solve a crime, we help find information, we show the generous side of human nature, the amazing parts of things that communities do to help each other, through good times and bad. But we also do go through some pretty traumatic things. So please, again, get the mental health help you need. This series was not meant as a bragging about gross, heinous crimes. This was these haunt me. And these are the stories, if I talk to a healthcare professional, I'm talking to them about how it bothers me and why, and how to process the information, and then how to continue to go on in my career, to have better coping skills for the next time this happens, so I can be a better asset to the community. So please make sure, take care of your mental health. And, heck, if you ever need someone to reach out to me, and I'll get you where you need to go. Have someone you can talk to, you can trust. Have that person who is going to help you get you through whatever it is that you're going through. You are doing good work. You are defending your First Amendment rights to a free press. What we do is a constitutionally protected job. So make sure that you're in the best mental and health space that you could possibly be, so you can continue on that mission that our founding fathers had for the free press. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next series.